Let's pause for a pure, crisp, smart water break. It's the vapor distilled, purely balanced pH.
Local is now open in Newport Beach. We're your neighborhood service hub for easy and safe order pickups, returns, alterations, and more. Like free holiday gifts.
Hello, welcome to Solitary Series. My name is James Lucarelli and you've tuned into the 13th installment. Today we're going to be focusing on drones, gimbals, and pretty much everything you need to fly, stabilize, or get that creative shot that you needed with your Komodo. Now I'm going to go ahead and look over to my right and make sure that everything is coming in good and make sure my audio is clean, and I want to thank everyone. Spotify's ads are playing. Okay. Perfect. All right, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to look over to my right and make sure audio is good. Thank you so much. And what we're going to be talking about today is really how excited we are to be showcasing you the Komodo, which is our newest addition to the RED family. It is also the smallest form factor RED camera to date. What we're essentially looking at here is my Komodo ST, or my limited edition white unit, and what I'm holding here is essentially a 4-inch by 4-inch by 4-inch cube, and with lenses and batteries, it's right around 6 pounds. If I was to go ahead and grab one of our DSMC2 cameras here, what you can easily see here is the size and form factor has definitely grown, and everything that's in my right hand right now with a 3.4 pound camera with now a I/O plate on the back is starting to get about as heavy as this camera here, but this camera is ready to shoot with a screen, lens, batteries, and if I spin it around this way, I can even see a little Velcro piece where I could attach a wireless mic or receiver. Now, if I go ahead and set this camera down, I want to go ahead and pull up our Ranger camera system here, and it's really nice to be able to see we have both our DSMC2 and our Ranger camera system here, and oftentimes I'll have customers ask me, hey, how do I go ahead and put this Ranger into a gimbal, or how do I go ahead and put it into a water housing? And really I say, you don't. That's where you get your modular DSMC2 camera, or perhaps your Komodo, and really that's going to allow you to have the most flexibility working with a camera system that starts off right around 2.1 pounds. Now to my right you can see my lightweight gimbal. This is a Crane 3S, very similar to the new Ronin S. The main thing you want to keep in mind here anytime we're working with a gimbal is ask yourself these 3 questions. What is the max capacity of the gimbal? What lens do we want to put on the camera? And last but not least, how many other accessories are going to have to put on there? Typically, you're going to have to worry about run stop cables, maybe a wireless monitor solution, but with the Komodo, remember, that's a 2.1 pound camera here, and if I go ahead and remove the screen and maybe use the lighter weight batteries here, I'm fully ready to run right around 6, 7, 8 pounds, and that's going to be more than enough to use that lightweight gimbal and still have some extra capacity. Now, we don't want to not talk about our full-size gimbal systems. That would be our Movi Pros, our Ronin 2s, and we're going to have Clay in the stream as well. And he's going to talk a little bit more about the full-size gimbal systems, and we can talk about some of the shots that you saw at the beginning of the stream. Now, right off the bat, whenever we talk about gimbals here, we talked about the weight, we talked about the accessories, but I'm going to quote Marcel, one of my good customers and friends, every ounce counts. So if you have a lens cap on there, or maybe even a stray piece of Velcro that wasn't on there before, do note that sometimes is enough to put your camera into a wiggle fit because you've now changed the balance or orientation. You do want to make sure that all of that is on first before you go ahead and start shooting. Now, I wanted to queue up, we're going to play a little short video here, and this is a little BTS of some of the stream that we saw earlier in the intro. And what you're going to see is both Clay Reed, our in-house photo content expert, as well as some of my good friends and former colleagues in Nar Lavani and JT Garden. And what you're going to see is a very great shoot where they had both a handheld Komodo, being able to shoot very nicely with the global shutter handheld, which they transitioned to a gimbal, and they can get some really creative shots, maybe going in and out of windows, and then later transition to a drone. And the great thing about that is we're not having to do a bait and swap in the production suite or in the post-production suite, because really all 3 of those cameras and systems are shooting with red code, shooting with similar lenses, and utilizing the same LUT. So it's really great to go ahead and see that. And I'm going to go ahead and play this video for you here shortly, and we'll go ahead and we'll talk to Clay Reed, our in-house photo expert, coming up shortly after that. And with that, I'd like to welcome in Clay. Clay, can you go ahead and see and hear us?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Going great.
How are you today?
Doing great. Hey, Clay, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about the gimbal systems you have there in the background, right? I have my Crane 3S right here, and I can see that you've got some of the full-size systems. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have there?
Yeah, so I create content here at the company. I created that video. It's the topper to the Komodo web page. And we did it all with Komodo gimbals and drones. And so we did some handheld shots. Those were awesome. I had my guys, Nalavani and JT Garden out, my favorite dudes to shoot with. And so I was strapped in the gimbal and I did that shot going out the window. And that was on the Mobi Pro, which you can see right here. And I've got the Ignite Digi Keystone system on there. So I've got their start stop cable. I'm powering the camera. I've also got batteries, as James said, kind of balancing out for my mat ball on there. And then after that, we went up in a Matrice with a Ronin MX, which I was actually super surprised by because DSMC2, we wouldn't have been able to do that. I've tried to balance DSMC2 MX setups before, and it's tough. You can get it done with some counterweights and stuff, but it's just not ideal. So, yeah.
And a couple of key things that Clay mentioned there, right? You know, even when you are powering off of the gimbal, the Komodo does have the ability to utilize these BP batteries in the back. And oftentimes, talking with customers, they may use these batteries just for counterweight. Watch as I go ahead and remove this battery. The front is going to go ahead and tilt down because I just went ahead and removed some of these batteries. So it's nice to have those on there, even if it is just good counterweight. And it's interesting to think of a gimbal and having good weight added, but yes, with Komodo being so light and then using heavier lenses, that's typically a nice option. Now, with those gimbal systems you have there in the back, do you know the capacity roughly for those gimbals?
Yeah, so the idea is that the Mobi Pro is a lighter weight setup. It's around 15 pounds max. And then the Ronin 2, which is the other one over here, is up to 30 pounds. And that's essentially how I use them. I'm often on the Mobi Pro because lighter cameras, lighter setup means I can be up longer. That's why I use a ready rig as well. It's so that I can keep my shot longer and keep my body going well longer and keep the shoot going longer and get more shots. So I do prefer a lighter weight setup, but there's sometimes that's just not going to work. And especially when you talk about overhead for your motors, right? So you don't really want to load the gimbal all the way up to capacity. It's going to create a tough situation for the motors to compensate for. And you can have some things like drag and different stuff like that that'll affect negatively on a higher payload package. That's when you'd want to jump up to a gimbal with a little bit more punch, a little bit more
And we were talking a little bit about it too, right? Just because you get it balanced in your, maybe the hermetically sealed camera room, and then you go outside where there's now wind also being introduced there, especially with the drone, that can also add and pull against it, especially if you're right up to that weight limit. I know that you and I have talked a little bit about how sometimes production needs and productions have maybe tweaked some of their camera call lists because previously they were using maybe a DSLR or another small mirrorless camera on the shoot to get that tight shot. Have you had some similar feedback from customers on set?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because in my free time on the weekends, I do a lot of skateboarding-based stuff and work for other clients and stuff. And so I was on a Nike shoot for Nigel's new shoe, and Johnny FPV did this awesome FPV drone shot, and it was a great shot, but they had a small mirrorless camera, a DSLR that they were working with, and I was talking to Johnny, and he's like, man, it's kind of a bummer coming back to this because he had recently done a shoot with Michael Bay for the Super Bowl with Komodo on an FPV, and he was just kind of regaling me with like, dude, it's next level. It's what we want to be doing, and unfortunately, I didn't have one with me. Otherwise, I would have been like, dude, ditch that mirror, let's take this thing. But at the time, it's a great shot. I don't want to talk bad about anyone's equipment. If you're getting the shot that you want creatively, then you're in a great place. But I think a lot of productions and a lot of people who are using these solutions that want a specific shot are aching for a little bit more value in the post, in the actual files themselves, and getting a little bit more out of those bit rates and all the color. It just, to have raw to work off of. I think those are the things that help production step up.
Well, and not just the production part of it, but also the post side of it. When we were talking about the wide open shoot, where you essentially were able to take your gimbal, which is nice and balanced, and then transition that to the drone. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So part of the reason why I like Mobi Pro, and there's some argument here, right? So what I did with Mobi Pro that I really love is I've got it rigged up with my Red Rock motors on there. And so everything's actually plugged directly into the Mobi Pro, and I'm using a controller like this to pull focus and switching between guided gimbal mode, where I'm using this stick to operate the gimbal, and majestic mode, where I'm using my body to operate the gimbal. So what we were able to do is I was able to have NAR pulling focus on that unit while I'm physically operating the gimbal and doing that stuff from the back of the buggy that we were chasing the motor rider with. And then I was essentially able to pull the gimbal off of the handle, put it onto an Alta 8. The pilot takes the bird up, and then I'm operating the gimbal both with the control stick and the focus control once we're up in the air. Because I've done some shot over stuff, and that's really the best way to do it. That's the best gimbal there is, right? So I've done a bunch of that, but that controller is so good. It's just the best. And I feel like Mobi Pro is the closest controller to that. The Ronin one's decent. I'm not knocking it, but I like the beef that you get with the controller set up down there and all the control, and it just sits evenly in your lap. And with Komodo, what was amazing is that I was able to keep my gimbal package small enough that I didn't really have to make too many adjustments to go up in the drone. Because usually what you'll do is a handheld gimbal setup is probably going to be a little bit on the heavier side, and then you're going to pare that down as much as possible to go up in the air to get the most flight time. But because of Komodo's low weight, I was able to rig it for one unified use and take that through the process to get from a gimbal shot in the back of the buggy all the way up in the air.
Couple of key things there, right? When you're talking about cutting down the ounces and cutting down the things there, I know from shared customers that when we say we shave a pound off the camera, that sometimes can mean an extra half hour up in the air. An extra half hour up in the air means less time waiting for the drone crew to get back up, and more time shooting and less time waiting. So great suggestions and feedback from yourself. I'm gonna look over and see if we have any other questions. I see your question, Luca, on using the Tokina. I've been using the Tokina as well on my gimbal on the Light Ronin S here. I'll save that for afterwards. Clay, is there anything else that you could go ahead and maybe some new creative shots that you're thinking about doing now with Komodo that previously you never would have thought with DSMC2 and Ranger?
Yeah, I'm still waiting. I think I'm getting my hands on an RS2 here pretty quick. And one of the things I'm excited about is, maybe trying some things with actually attaching the gimbal in different places. Because I noticed with hard mounting, it's awesome. But unless you've got a great shock absorber, which is tough to do on something like the front of a motorcycle, it can still have some bounce to the footage. And so I'm looking at different ways of possibly taking those smaller, lightweight gimbals and actually using them as a mounting point or a mounting post to then orient the camera back for a specific shot for myself. I really, really love the cinematography in Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream. And so there's this one scene where one of the Wayans brothers is running down the alleyway and he's got the camera attached to him. And so it creates this really beautiful, chaotic feeling that's so apt for the moment of that scene, that it's just the chaos of the world moving around a central person, and the camera position is fixed to that person. It creates a really unique effect that, man, I can't imagine how they pulled it off with a film camera, because just trying to think about how to properly do it with a Komodo, I'm like, okay, do I get a gimbal? And it's going to be so much easier and so much more possible with that.
And talking to your
small package.
And talking with yourself and with other customers, that camera angle you're talking about, that snorri cam that goes right up your nose, it's definitely something where it was a tough conversation to ask that athlete or ask that talent, hey, do you mind wearing this bigger rig? But now with a 2-pound system here, it's something that can be used as a helmet cam or that snorri cam or something that's previously never thought of. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to look over and see if there is any more questions on, Clay has the Ignite Digi Keystone. He's got a couple other great configurations there. If anyone has any questions on the full size, just know that Clay is going to stay around and be in the panel. So if anyone has any additional questions on his setup, Clay will be happy to help. And I want to thank you so much for your time, Clay, and we'll see you in the panel.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in one last thing. People were asking about the RS2. I think that is a great unit. I'm really excited to try it out, but I can't personally speak to it because I haven't put it in my own hands. Thanks, James. I'll talk to you later.
And back to that question there, the Ronin, the Crane, whatever system you're using, we still ask ourselves those same key questions. What is the max capacity? What is the camera and lens combination I want to use? And what is the additional accessories that I need to put on there? As I go ahead and fly this little graphic here in the upper right-hand corner, you should see myself building that Crane 3S with my Komodo, pretty light, pretty nimble, not nearly as large of a setup as what Clay's using here, but that allows me to easily grab it in that monopod configuration, maybe drop it down to that lunchbox type of shot. And as you see there's no additional cables to my camera. I essentially just have a little C-clamp here matched to the drone. There's no additional cables. I'm using the ad hoc wireless mode within the Komodo, and I'll typically take it to the lowest quality, so that way I don't have that much latency. And remember, that's not changing your recording quality, that's just changing your live stream quality, so I don't trip on over any cables when I'm using this for both monitoring, run, stop, and control. Now, when we talk about drones, Clay mentioned a couple of things there. He talked about both being the gimbal operator while someone was the pilot, and then we also talked about FPOV, which is essentially just a flying POV shot. Think of your bird's point of view. Now, anytime we're working with either a drone or an FPOV or a drone with a gimbal or an FPOV, we definitely encourage you to hire the local authorized talent that does have gone through the proper training. It is not something that you want to go ahead and get your Komodo and just fly it up in the air without at least checking with proper regulations first. Definitely something to check with first. And when we're also talking about working with drones, it's definitely something that you always want to make sure you have that wireless monitoring system, whether that's a Teradek, a Vaxis system, whatever it may be. The Komodo does have some very powerful live stream capabilities out of it, but it's probably not something that I'd want to trust with my camera up in the air. That's where I'd want to have a professional dedicated system with big antennas and zero latency and much larger range. Now, we've talked about gimbals, we've talked a little bit about drones. We're now going to talk a little bit about something that's a little bit near and dear to my heart, which is shooting in the water and shooting with water housings. Now, I'm going to spin around here real quick and grab one of our brand new, it's the Salty Komodo housing here. As you can see here, it is getting very small and very sleek. You can notice I have all of my buttons right here for normal Komodo camera control. And the nice thing about working with a housing like this is oftentimes you're out in the water, it's dark, it's cold, it's constantly moving and changing, and having the ability to change your settings within your housing is going to be very, very important. Now, think of your touchscreen, think of that wireless connectivity that we use with our cameras. All that goes out the window as soon as we put this in the water. That's why I like to have the Red Control app handy, maybe topside with the boat, or maybe in the water ski if you're fortunate enough to have that close by. So that way you could go ahead, break the surface, and go ahead and make whatever changes you want, and essentially you're not going to be able to do that when it's down in the water. Now, if I can go ahead and A and B it, what I'm holding here is two of our Salty housings. This is the Salty DSMC2 housing, and this is the Salty Komodo housing. Now, notice that the size has changed, and anyone that's ever swam with a water housing knows that it's kind of like swimming with a canteen or a flotation device out in the water, or at least with these splash housings. A smaller housing is kind of like a smaller flag in the wind. It has less drag and less pushback when I need to dip through a wave or get out of the way. This is really great for topside shooting or maybe near or around the surface. The Salty housings are good for right around 30 feet below. Now, in situations when I have to go deeper than that, that's when you're going to look to our other great partners, when Gates and Nauticam, and they make deeper housings that are actually weighted, because when you're down that deep, you want to have that neutral buoyancy and not have the housing constantly trying to float up to the surface. Those housings are rated much, much deeper, can go up to right around 250 feet, and all of those can be seen on our third-party Red Approved page, and really great options for you there depending on whatever your particular shoot is. Now I'm going to look over to my right and see if there's any more questions. We got the Ronin S clarified. Any other questions on the housings here? And while we're letting those come in, I'm going to go ahead and play a quick little video here that was one of the very early tests that I did with the salty water housing. I want to thank Anthony Maltese for participating, and after that we'll open it up to any more questions on the housings.
Gift wrapping on your Nordstrom purchases. To get the Nordstrom experience a little closer to home, visit Nordstrom.
Thank everyone for taking a quick peek at that quick little reel here. And I did see a question come in from Antonio here, and he's asking what's the best settings to use with your hydrogen, or doesn't really necessarily have to be your hydrogen, it could also be your iOS-based device. Notice that I'm using both of these, and they are live monitoring directly out of my Komodo over here. I can actually go to this view here, which will allow you to see myself up here as well as my Komodo over here live. And notice that as I stick my fingers in front of the shot, you're seeing all of that happen pretty much live on the SDI and the top LCD. And if I wanted the least amount of latency on my phone, that's where I would say, for my own personal preference, I like to mount this directly to my gimbal, and then I'll go into ad hoc mode. If you're not sure on how to set up ad hoc mode, we did a previous solitary series called Red Control, as well as connecting your Komodo, and both of those walk you through step-by-steps on how you could set it up. I personally would go right over here into Menu, Communication, Wi-Fi, and that's where we would go into ad hoc mode. Right now I'm in infrastructure and I don't want to take that out, but essentially once it's in ad hoc mode, your camera is essentially hotspotting or broadcasting a live stream signal. It is a mobile JPEG signal. It is MJPEG compression. Remember, that's not affecting the quality. That's just affecting how quickly that's going out to your phone or to your wireless device. And really, I like the lowest quality on the live stream, and I like ad hoc mode because regardless if I walk out of the Wi-Fi or the infrastructure Wi-Fi, as long as I'm in close enough proximity to the camera, that works well enough for me. It's less than a second there, and if it's really, really close, I'm talking fractions of a second. So that was a great question, Antonio. And I want to thank everyone for continuing to ask these great questions. I want to thank Clay for making himself available, Johnny, and all of our great partners for providing these housings. This was a great, great stream, and I want to encourage you to ask any additional questions. If you did have any questions, you can always email us at solitaryseries@red. And last but not least, let's talk about everything else, right? You know, we have a camera here that is now light enough that you can throw this on that Snorri cam rig. You could potentially get it on a helmet cam. Glide cam monopods are all options that you can now do with a very, very small lightweight camera system, and really this is going to be opening up a lot of doors to get some very creative shots and also be able to keep it in line with the production and the look that you need. Yeah, so with housings, the front element of them is completely interchangeable. So you do have to be specific about the lenses you're using. Currently, this one is meant for a 16 to 35. It is a domed port, and it does have a focus control on here. But typically, you will buy the housing, and then you can buy different ports for your different lenses. So yes, I don't want to misspeak for what their port options are, but you can definitely reach out to Matt at Salty or John down at Gates or the lovely guys at Nauticam, and they'll definitely help you out with matching a port that goes with your lenses. Great stuff here. And once again, I do have the Salty Komodo housing as well as the DSMC2 housing. And it's really great to be able to switch between the two because maybe the production calls for 8K. Maybe the production calls for higher frame rates. I can easily switch to the DSMC2 water housing. Notice it's a little bit larger, but this water housing will work with with our DSMC unified body, and you then have 4 sensor options. So really, great options from Salty, Gates, Nauticam. We want to thank all of our partners for working with us. And once again, you can always go to red.com third-party approved page and see that it's constantly being updated with the latest and greatest products that you can work with. All right, well, I'm looking over to my associates in the chat and seeing if there is any additional questions that we may have missed. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Clay and Jay and Nar for putting together such an exceptional reel that started off the beginning of the stream. Definitely got me going. And I want to thank you all for making part of this. And to quote Clay, I want everyone to get out there and go shoot something and continue to be safe and respectful and take care of your neighbor if you can. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. This has been a great solitary series. Thank you so much.